Blake, what's the most dangerous job in tech?
Well, apparently when you're testing a power amp, you can accidentally kill yourself.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who will never test a power amp here at Church Gear because it could kill you, apparently. And I'm here with my co-host who eats electricity for breakfast, Toby Walters.
Can you eat electricity? Now I'm curious.
You can... I think you can,
there's probably residual electricity in our food, like just energy, basically.
I think the cats and dogs of America would attest that if you chew on the wires at your house long enough, you start to taste electricity when it shocks you.
And I just want to say that I've tested hundreds of power amps before like Church Gear really became a thing and we had real techs here, and I never blew one up. But now it's been like 2 or 3 times as our techs here at Church Gear have, which is why we test everything first. They've tested it and it just starts smoking.
Church Gear, we blow up so you don't have to.
My brother's college roommate had this brilliant idea. Sounds like something you would try. I wonder what would happen if I plug a speaker into a just electrical socket.
Okay.
Yeah, the speaker caught fire. Imagine that.
That sounds not good.
So I'm sure a lot of our listening audience is thinking now currently, like, what is the most dangerous job in tech? Like, I'm assuming they're thinking like a rigger or something, maybe like a truck driver. I don't know. But in my experience, it's the studio engineer has the most dangerous job on the planet.
Why? Because the talent might kill them if they get it wrong? Well,
that is part of it. So I've heard some stories from some friends that were there. So that's a secondhand story, right? It's not thirdhand.
I think they call that BS. Yes. Bulletproof story.
So the first story, it's not dangerous, but it's just fun. So a friend of mine worked at a studio in Los Angeles in the 90s. And this was when Shaq, I don't know if you know that Shaq was a rapper for a while and did a couple rap albums.
Truly, if you Google any famous person, 50-50 shot that they're going to be a rapper. Like there's a 50% chance that they're going to be a rapper.
There's a 50-cent chance that they're a 50 Cent?
Yep.
Is that it?
Well, that they're rapping.
So he said Shaq would come into the studio and they would, record all day and all night, but he would bring an entourage and he would bring like 20 or 30 people. And he said by the end of the night, basically every night, the studio was trashed. They would just party, they would have food, they'd have drinks, and it would just be an absolute mess. And at the end of the night, which was probably honestly like 6 a.m, Shaq would go to the studio manager and just say, all right, what do I owe you? And he would just write him a check for the damages, and it would usually be about $20,000.
Every night?
That's what my friend said, and he was working at the studio at the time.
Oh my gosh, what are they doing? Like rolling their blunts with like the skin of the drums? Like, if destroying everything?
You spill drinks on the mixer, you put food on the tape machine, like they've got to bring in repair techs to service these things constantly.
At Church Gear, we only spend about $1,000 on nightly damages when we go to an event.
Only you, Blake.
Well, didn't we kind of get blamed for spilling all of that stuff at the MXU live event on one of their trucks?
Oh, somebody spilled something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Our guys claim it was not us.
Allegedly.
Drew Hester did spit in Adam Taylor's face, but that was a separate instance.
Which that is damaging definitely more than $20,000 worth of goods.
So another instance, again, I heard this secondhand. This was a studio in San Diego. And I assume you know this, Blake, but like recording studios, especially back before like pre-20 years ago, could have hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars of gear and equipment in there. And some still do. And so like there is a lot of money essentially in that equipment. So one night a band is recording with the engineers at the studio, and armed masked men came in and tied them up and held them at gunpoint, except for one of them who had to unscrew the rack equipment from the rack and load it into their truck.
That's called gun gear.
That was wild. And the final moment was, do you remember that I started a recording studio like with my dad and a couple other people at the church I grew up at?
Oh, yeah. Playboy Inc. We have gotten gear from them.
So we started a recording studio in the basement of the church, and it was very rudimentary compared to studios
no way.
that had, millions of dollars of gear. We had hundreds of dollars of gear, but it looked cool to the untrained eye. You would go in there and be like, this is fancy. Yes, you would ooh and ah. And so it was in the basement of the church. And one day I came on a morning to go down to the studio, and I walked in. There's like a long hallway that leads to the staircase that goes down to the basement. And so I get to the front door of the church, and I open the front door, and I look all the way down to the hallway to the top of the stairs, and like there's a bunch of stuff at the top of the stairs. And there's not normally stuff at the top of the stairs. Like, I didn't know if somebody left a bunch of like cleaning supplies or something. So as I get closer, the stuff starts to look familiar.
This was when your wife kicked you out?
No.
Threw all your stuff at the church?
I was not married at the time. This was pre-Shelley days.
Ooh, dark times.
I know, I was young. But it was all the equipment from the recording studio in the basement was sitting at the top of the stairs.
What, did like a new pastor move in and they like let him live in the basement or something?
No, we think that somebody came in and started like loading it out in order to steal it. And then somebody came and like they heard them or saw them at the front door trying to come in, and they booked it. But all the equipment from the studio is sitting at the top of the stairs, and nobody knows why. That was absolutely the explanation. Somebody was trying to steal it.
Criminals, it just goes to show, don't do a half measure. Don't take it up to one spot. Pick it up once. Take it right from the studio to the car.
So my theory is that all these church techs are getting these positions in, a Sunday morning environment because it's just safer.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You don't have people trying to steal or rob you from the tech booth. The only people taking gear out of there is us, and we pay people 50% of the time.
And occasionally Chris Tomlin, apparently.
Yeah, you got to kick him out. Well, speaking of someone I would definitely never kick out, the mix engineer, a freelance mix engineer out of Atlanta, David Stagl. David, welcome to the show. And did I say your last name correctly?
You did, and thank you very much for having me. The studio position is the most dangerous position for you. I think you're doing something wrong. I mean, I remember doing front of house at Northpoint. Sometimes we would do these crazy specials and openers, and I seem to remember one where they thought it was a good idea to pass out like little footballs to everybody in the room, and those were getting thrown all over the room during the opener. So I remember I had people in front of house like swatting them away to keep from hitting the gear. So
they were throwing them at y'all at front of house, not the stage?
No, they were just it was just they were going all over the place. There was another time with beach balls. I remember those were not as dangerous, but the small footballs, that was a one time only thing after that.
And I think the issue is like all the live engineers and live production people that we had on this podcast have gotten their opportunities for their disaster stories. We've had line arrays falling on people's face. We've had people suspended from the ceiling that like fell 50 feet almost
We've had their
high.
gear literally melt.
Yeah. So I felt like, studio engineers never get the opportunity for disaster stories, but they happen.
I got a little disaster story of my own. Lighting guys and girls, cover your ears. But speaking of the beach balls, David, we were doing that at youth ministry. I got to tell you guys, if you want to see the proof that God is real, go to youth ministry and see that kids don't die every week. It's crazy the games that they play at Fellowship Bible Church Brentwood. Mm-hmm. We're hitting these beach balls up in the air, and they've got this cool lighting thing over top of us. There's two on each side, and it just smashes into it and busts like light bulbs. Light bulbs break. The glass starts falling on the children. It was
That'll
crazy.
be fine, right?
No one got hurt.
Yeah, Blake, I was a youth pastor for 3 years, pre-Shelley again.
Is that where It'll Be Fine came from?
It had to, because there was all sorts of those moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, did that kid just break his... No, he's okay. Okay, get up, shake it off, walk it off.
You know what? I got a concussion at a youth camp, but that's a story for another time.
I mean, ministry is a dangerous occupation.
Speaking of danger...
This is true.
Yeah.
Let's get into David's lie and see. I got to tell you, Toby, I'm on a hot streak. How
many have you had in a row? Like 2?
Out of the past 8 weeks. Now, this is going to be weird because of the way we record, but out of the past 8 weeks, I'm 6 of 8.
I think what's weird is that you're keeping track.
I gotta
pat
count my
yourself on the-
wins.
Yeah. Do you have so few wins that you have to count this one?
I have less wins than I do fingers.
I mean, but look at your wife, dude. You
That's
won,
true.
okay?
That's true.
Yeah. All right.
Number 1, I train wrecked an Andy Stanley sermon while serving as the audio director for Northpoint Community Church for 9 years.
Did he train wreck the sermon for 9 years?
That's what I was gonna say. I hope that's true somehow.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have made it 9 years if I did it for the whole 9 years.
I mean, we've heard nothing but wonderful things about Andy as a human being, so maybe he's just that gracious.
Look, if you're nice
He is pretty gracious.
in business, you can be incompetent and mean and get fired. But if you're incompetent and nice, you can make it a long time.
That's why you're still here, Blake.
I don't know that
Wait.
anyone would accuse me of being nice.
No. You're fired.
Number
That's it.
2. Oh, there it is. I've trained hundreds of audio volunteers and staff across the country at churches of all sizes, ranging from some of the largest and most influential to the average church up the street.
What about the church down the street?
It's always up the street.
Gosh.
Number 3. I've worked on music recordings, television broadcasts, concerts, theater, and musicals, but never on a feature film.
Until this podcast.
Exactly. David, that's because you can't work on the film. You need to be in the film. That's a face for the big screen.
I don't know about that.
That's a face for SNL.
There we go. What does that mean?
Saturday Night Live.
It's a face. It's a face for radio, is what it is.
It just
So,
makes me smile, you know?
Number 4, I regularly serve on the audio crew for the annual Passion Conference here in Atlanta. That's got to be true because he lives in Atlanta.
The unfortunate part is I don't know, but we could have asked like half of our guests at this point who have worked on the Passion Conference.
Number 5, I'm a member of the Waves plugins artist roster and have plugin presets featured in plugins such as H Reverb, H Compressor, and CLA Mix Hub.
All right. That's pretty cool in the audio engineering world, just so you know, because I know you have no idea what any of that meant.
I do know that when it comes to plugins, people love them or hate them. 6, and finally, over the last year, I've begun working in the Dolby Atmos format in my studio. Ooh, Dolby. It's like we're at AMC.
Okay, Blake, you have a feeling? One of these I already know because David and I are best friends on Facebook.
Like, you know it's true or you know the lie? Because if you know the lie, that's a pretty big one.
Well, I know one of these is not the lie.
Okay. That's tough.
That's a good guess that one of them isn't.
What do you got, Blake?
All right. I am going to say the number 3.
2, 1. Number 3?
Yeah. He's
Dang it, I
worked
was
on a
gonna
feature
guess that
film.
one.
Hey, last
Now I'm
time you
gonna-
said that, I got it right. I stole it from you.
I've got to start guessing first. Okay, I'm going to guess that he does not work on the audio crew for the Passion Conference because it just seems so obvious.
It is
it's
very
in
obvious.
Atlanta. I'm sure he knows the whole crew, but I'm just saying he doesn't.
All right, David, we're locked in. What's your lie?
I have not served at Passion on their audio crew,
I am the champion, my friend.
but I do know most of those guys. So
Blake, do you want to bow to my intelligence and overwhelming awesomeness right now?
Do we curse on this podcast?
Is it still categorized as a Christian podcast?
Yeah, actually, I don't think that was an option for us.
It
I
wasn't?
think we're just music stuff.
All right. So you can say Jesus and crap on the same podcast.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. All right. So you love your plugins, huh? Big plugin guy?
I don't know if love is the right word, but I do use them.
Okay.
So are you basically as famous as CLA at this point?
Yeah, I don't think that's. I did have. I used to write articles for Waves, and I remember there was a maybe it was only a couple of hours, but I remember there was a picture of Chris, and then there was my picture right next to him on the website somehow, and that's probably as close as I ever got to that.
So Blake, philosophical question for you: CLA or TLA?
TLA for sure.
Okay.
I mean,
So there are two brothers, Chris Lord. Is it Algie or Alge?
It's Algie.
Okay. So there's Chris Lord Algie and there's Tom Lord Algie. And they're both mix engineers and they're both like two of the greatest mix engineers on the planet. So like half the major hits that you love have been mixed by one of them. Like Fall Out Boy, I guarantee
oh
you.
my gosh, one of the best bands of all time.
Yeah. So to have David have his face next to Chris Lord Algie is like you putting your face next to...
Your face? I'll tell you after the
That's
show
good.
why they couldn't have put it as TLA. I mean, that's,
Okay.
you probably already know, but okay. Should we ask you about your train wrecking of Andy Stanley now, or should we save that for the disaster story at the end?
You can save it for the disaster story at the end. I've got another disaster story too, if you want to hear that later too. So it's up to.
Let's do it now, and then you can give us
you.
That was going to be a cliffhanger the whole episode. People are now just going to hear the story and be like, "I'm out."
And they can tune it, and then we'll just cut to the chase, and then they can skip to the next episode, I guess.
Look, Church Gear faithfuls, after 60 seconds, it counts as a number on my card at work that I get credit for. So if you ever hate an episode, just make it through a minute. Yeah, give us your disaster story with Andy Stanley here if you've got another one later, because I love these.
Sure. Okay. So this is it's a little technical, requires probably a lot more setup than it needs. We went through a season at Northpoint where we were doing 3 services every morning, and the 9 a.m. had really good attendance. The 11 a.m. had outstanding attendance, and people were standing around the walls most of the time. And then the 12:45, the third service, not really a lot of people showing up at 12:45 in the middle of lunchtime.
You got football going on too.
Yeah, there's that. People want to get up to the lake, I guess, on Sunday afternoons. So in an attempt to kind of open up more seats at the 11 a.m., because that was a big thing for us when I was on staff at Northpoint, was we were trying to create open seats so that people could come and check things out, learn about Jesus, all that kind of fun stuff. And in an attempt to kind of spread the attendance out, Andy stopped speaking at the 11 a.m. So he would speak at the 9 a.m. At the 11 a.m., we would show him on video. And then at the 12:45, he would speak live again. But he would do the welcome live at 11 a.m. And then he'd be video for the message and then back live at 12:45. So in an attempt to kind of keep things simple for our volunteers, I had set things up so that when it got to message time at the 11 a.m., it would repatch the console so that the input into his channel on the console was basically the video for his message. So volunteers, they could mix 3 services without having to think about doing something different at each service. It was all built into the snapshot lists. It would happen automatically. The one caveat was you had to move that snapshot, that repatch things. You had to manually place that before the service, and you had to remove it for the next service. So one day we got to the 12:45 service, and I was at front of house, and he did the welcome and everything seemed to be fine. And then we got to his message and he started talking and he paused. And he said, "Do you hear that?" And I thought, "Whoa, sounds normal." And I turned to look over at the producer and she gave me a funny look like, "What's going on? It sounds fine." He said, "No, do you hear that? Something's off." And then he said, "Tina," who was the producer, "Tina, come up here and listen to this." And I started getting a little nervous and I turned to my A2 and I said, go backstage and see what's going on. Because we had a wedge backstage that sometimes would get used so that people who were backstage, they could listen to the message. And I thought, oh, maybe somebody left it on. And Andy has pretty good hearing. I think he was involved in audio production at one point in time. So I thought, hey, maybe something's back there. And just about the time that he got back and hit the comm, it dawned on me, oh, we're listening to the tape return. So we're listening to him coming back on video. And we had a delay built into that return because the video system was about 3 frames behind. So to get the lip sync in, we had some executive producers who were very sensitive to lip sync in the auditorium. So it used to do some delay on that. And when I figured it out, I repatched it and got it all set and got the delay off. And he was like, "Oh, now it's okay." And he went right on. But that was a good, 3-4 minutes that went past without anything happening.
It was just quiet on the stage for 3 to 4 minutes.
No, he was talking. He was trying to, he would just, I think he would just say things, and cause he was hearing 100 millisecond delay approximately, and just the slap. And he was sitting there talking and like echoing to himself.
I was hoping it was like the Jessica Simpson moment on Saturday Night Live, where he starts his sermon and it's like actually a bad lip sync read to his live stream.
So he had to run off or something.
That'd be great.
Oh,
he kept right on going. So, yeah.
And then probably,
but he didn't start the sermon until we got it all fixed, and then he went right in. So
did you ever?
But he was very, very gracious about it after the service. So.
Did you ever offer to him that in order to lighten the load at the 11 a.m. service that you would not mix that service, since obviously so many people were coming to hear your mix?
No, I hadn't thought about that, but I suppose maybe we could have done that. Maybe we could have turned the lights off or
look. Everybody knows that the TD is the most important staff member on a Sunday morning.
Well, he's not the TD necessarily; he's the mix engineer.
Toby, that means the same thing to me.
So, David, we kind of know Northpoint and obviously Andy Stanley, and it's been, sort of a generation of an extremely influential church. But it's kind of like in the tech world, Northpoint was so well known for pioneering live stream, or kind of the multi-site, sending the signal on different campuses. But tell us about, the audio production there. What were you guys doing that was different or unique, or maybe you're like, no, I had the boring job while they got to do all the cool stuff.
I don't know. And I think, I don't think even any of the video guys there would have, like, none of us really thought about anything we were doing as pioneering. I think we were all just trying to solve the challenges that we were being presented with the best we could. I don't know. I think maybe, if we were pioneering about something, in the early years, maybe it was just caring about things sounding good, because sometimes it seemed like that was a rare thing. I think, we were maybe one of the earlier churches to start turning the volume up a little bit, although I know we weren't alone in doing that. I think the guys down at Fellowship, down in Grapevine, they were pushing things too. But that kind of, for me, when I discovered Northpoint, I know it resonated with me because musically it felt like, hey, this is a lot closer to where I came from in terms of kind of rock and roll and being able to push the guitars and low end. Maybe that was something we were doing that not a lot of people were pushing at the time. And we had a lot of subwoofers in there that seemed to be a little unusual for churches at the time. But
did you feel like
Northpoint
was kind of one of the, along with Fellowship and Willow Creek and Saddleback, that were kind of on the cutting edge, 20 years ago, that you guys were, investing into a live environment where a lot of other churches were still fighting over hymns versus praise songs?
Yeah, that's possible. I think we weren't really concerned about what other churches were doing. I mean, I think at least I liked looking to see what other churches were doing, and, we were looking for ideas and new things to try, but, we definitely had our way of doing things, and, just kind of try to do that because, one of the things that was different, I think, for us was, Northpoint was originally designed to be a church for the unchurched. So that's who we were trying to reach. We weren't really thinking about what the church down the street or up the street was doing. We were thinking more in terms of, what are the other things out there that are competing for people's attention, concerts, going to football games, going to the beach or the lake or movie theaters. Like, those were the kinds of things we were thinking about. So a lot of the production we were doing was kind of based more off of that, because we wanted to have an environment where people could bring their friends, or people could just show up and it not feel unfamiliar to them. Not this like, oh, we're in some weird place this weekend. It's like, no, it's a room full of people and we're going to make some noise.
And Blake, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of I like it loud at church. Obviously it's got to be mixed well, but I want to feel it. I don't want to hear my own voice when I sing.
I don't want to hear my wife's voice. Don't tell her.
So, David, you're there for 9 years, and you apparently one of your truths is that you trained other audio volunteers or tech volunteers across the country. So you've got someone like yourself that's mixing at Northpoint, and then you've got someone like Blake that knows absolutely nothing about tech.
Mixing at South Dole.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that what were some of the key things that you would typically teach these volunteers, and what'd you often find that you were surprised they didn't know?
Well, I mean, it depends on it. At Northpoint, we had it set up where it was really kind of an apprentice system. So it was really designed to meet people where they were at when they came in. So that was all kind of one-on-one. After I left Northpoint, I did a lot of training on the road and traveling. It varies. I mean, sometimes it's simple stuff a lot of the time. And a lot of time it's just people just really need some coaching and encouragement in what they're doing, kind of a reset on things. A lot of churches, they're audio volunteers, even some of the staff, they haven't had professional experience. They haven't had professional mentors. So a lot of times they're just kind of filling in the gaps. I don't know that there's anything specific. I guess a lot of times, I just kind of focus on just starting with a basic kind of musical sounding balance. A lot of times the churches that were bringing me in, it would end up being the worship pastors who were really fighting to have me come in because they wanted it to sound like music, and it didn't at the time. But everybody, most of the volunteers, the staff, everybody I meet, everybody has the best intentions. They're just trying to get better and just trying to move people in the right direction and take them to the next level for where they're at.
And it seems now you're doing a lot of studio stuff. It seems you're mixing in Dolby Atmos. Do you have, a preference? Does your heart belong to live or studio, or does it depend on the day?
Yeah, some of it depends on the day. I think it goes in phases. When I started out my career, well, I did sound in high school, and that was mostly kind of live theater and stuff like that. College and after college was more the studio side of things. And then I eventually found myself in church world doing the live stuff. I enjoy it all. They all have their challenges. I think I like working in my studio because it's in my house and I don't have to deal with Atlanta traffic to get anywhere.
It is like the eighth wonder of the world.
It's something else. I think San Francisco is worse, and DC is worse, and
Houston and LA.
LA is its own thing, and but it is. I moved down here from Chicago, and I remember people talking to me about the traffic, and I was like, "Come on, I'm from Chicago. How bad can it really get? I mean, we got bad traffic up there too, but it can be something else down here for sure." But I still do a lot of live stuff, and I like being able to mix it up. It's fun.
And I know for myself that I started in live, but then I just fell in love with studio. I think I enjoyed the opportunity to continually refine it. Live, you get one shot. Like you were asking us, David, at the beginning of this, do you guys edit this thing? And rarely, Blake, do we edit much out, except for
just Toby's cursing and my flatulence.
I think it's actually the other way around.
My flatulence and your cursing.
But yeah, I know for myself, it was the studio that I really loved. I felt like I just couldn't quite keep up in live.
Or the studio, as you don't presently work there.
We're in a studio recording this, Blake.
Well, that's true. But speaking of the studio, most mixers are only doing one originally, live mixing or studio mixing. So now that churches are live streaming everything, both are needed. So what tips would you give someone who's trying to improve their skills in both settings now that they're kind of having to do both? Besides not having their wedge mess them up.
Right. That's important. I think mixing, whether you're mixing live or in the studio, I mean, there's a lot of fundamentals that are just a part of mixing that really cross over between the two of them. It's different challenges for sure, but I think first and foremost, you have to put time into it. If you're mixing live and the only time you're ever working on your craft is when there's a band on stage, it's going to take you a long time to get better, especially in a church setting where, Sunday's only coming once a week. Maybe you get a midweek rehearsal in there. That's not a lot of time to do it. And mixing music, it's not really a technical thing. It's a musical discipline. It's more of a craft. So it takes time and repetition to master. So, the musicians can go home and practice, but if you're only going to practice when people are there in the room, it's going to take you a long time. The 10,000 hours thing, I think that got debunked, but there's definitely some truth to putting in the time, I think, on things. So you've got to find a way to do the same thing. With virtual sound check these days, I'm always surprised when I go somewhere to do training and I ask them how often they're using virtual sound check and nobody is doing it. And that was a key for me, I think, in really refining my skills. And it was a big part of our workflow at Northpoint. I mean, we would rehearse on Wednesday nights and the band would go home and we would stick around a couple more hours and just work on the mix with virtual sound check. And then on Sunday morning, we would check everything with virtual sound check before we started again. I mean, little things like that can go a long way. Another thing that I think can be real helpful is you've got to get into a controlled environment where you can really hear what you're doing. Every decision we make is based off of what we hear. So if you're in a room where, your front of house location is in a small little booth with a little tiny window to the room, you're going to have a hard time hearing what's going on out there. That's a whole other conversation that probably needs to be had about where your front of house location should be in the first place. But, if you're dealing with a situation like that right now, just to be practical, you've got to find yourself an environment where you can really hear things. And it can be as simple as just getting a really good pair of headphones and working on stuff. And, most of the digital consoles these days give us the ability to multi-track record. So start recording every week and take some time and start working on things, whether that's virtual sound check at your church, working with the console, or, get a DAW and just start working on things at home. The fundamentals, the basics of all the equipment, EQs, compressors, there's a lot of the same kind of thing with all of them. Sometimes you just need to start learning things and really kind of practicing your instrument, so to speak. So,
and David, when you have freelance gigs, say you're mixing Sunday morning at a church that you're not familiar with, you're not familiar with their system, how do you prepare yourself for that Sunday morning?
Those are tough. I usually try and get in early for sure. And typically for me, if I'm going anywhere new for the first time where I'm going to be mixing, it's a little different when I'm training, but if I'm going to be there mixing, I usually try and get in a day ahead of time to see what's going on, because a lot of churches have got some very interesting things set up in their console templates, I guess I'll just say, and also find lots of interesting things on consoles that I have to follow. So, I would have to get in there and spend some time to figure out what's going on before I can even start working. So hopefully there's a midweek rehearsal. And if I can get in somewhere where they've got a recording from a previous week, I will always go in and play around with that for a little while. Depending on the console, it could be anything from, I just need a couple hours to, I'm going to need a whole day to really get things to where I'm going to feel comfortable with things.
So let's take, an average small church in America. They've got one volunteer tech person, and we'll call him Blake. And
oh, brother.
And they have, maybe an X32, maybe something even simpler. And they've got a mix for the room, and they've got a mix for live stream off the same board. How are you coaching them to get the most out of both?
That's a great question. I get a lot of people asking about live stream stuff. And a lot of times when people are asking me, like, they want to set up a separate studio, and I usually ask them what's your goal in your live stream? I think it's important for churches today to have some kind of online presence, because that's where a lot of people are really going to get exposed to you for the very first time. I don't know that it always has to be live, though, for an online presence. Because my recommendation is usually, get your room right first. Northpoint, we were streaming online for 722. Like, they were doing that before I went on staff in 2006, because I used to watch 722 online sometimes. At least I would check out the music side of things. And the reason that they could do that was because the room had good acoustic treatment. The loudspeaker system had been set up properly and tuned. So it was kind of like mixing in a studio environment. Finding personnel to mix at front of house and in the studio is really challenging. I know a lot of churches, they're challenged just in finding personnel to mix at front of house. So I usually recommend, invest in that person, invest in the environment they're working in. When you start making it sound better in the room, a lot of times that translates even more outside of the room. You start making it better in the room, you start getting better engagement from your attenders, which will engage the band to perform better. All of this stuff it's a chain reaction. If your pastor is getting more engagement during his messages, a lot of times he will react a little different. All of this stuff will translate outside of the room a lot better. So I always say, start with the room. If you don't have any acoustic treatment, get some acoustic treatment. Get your front of house position in a place where you can hear what everybody in the room is hearing, not off in a corner somewhere down the hall. Get your sound system treated properly and start from there. And then the big thing is work on your craft. Get your skills going. There's a lot of resources online these days that you can check out. And I still do a lot of training and coaching and traveling. When people ask to come in and train, you can bring somebody like me in, or, another engineer, maybe somebody in the area who can help, things like that. That's usually what I would say to start with, really refine your craft.
Blake, I want to send you out to some churches to coach them on acoustic treatment. Do you remember when we were recording the podcast at your house, Blake? And
yes,
every surface is hard in your house. And so what did you do, Blake?
I strung a sheet,
a bed sheet, a single bed sheet
on the stairwell. And I think I remember someone saying that it was really good audio that day. So it was.
So not egg crates.
No.
Or egg cartons.
Yeah, he's like, man, it is really echoey in here. Hold on. And he grabs a single bed sheet and puts it over the banister like that's going to make any difference.
I'm not saying that I could make an integration company, but I am starting an LLC. Speaking of mixing in such random settings, how different is it mixing in surround in the studio versus mixing in immersive in a live setting? And how much bed sheets are you using?
Bed sheets. Well, I try and avoid the bed sheets in the live setting. The
Why?
fire marshal might have some issues with that, but I'm not sure those would be to code. It's there's similarities, but I think it's a different thing, and I think it's I think there are different goals. The immersive thing in live sound, to me, you really have to think about the size of your venue and distances. You know, if you've got a large venue and you've got speakers set up all around the room, you know, the rough, and I hate to bring up math, but the rough estimate is about a foot of distance is going to equal to about a millisecond of time. So if you have a band playing in time and you start moving them around the room, you might start moving them out of time for certain people in that room. So you have to kind of be conscious of that. But I think for me, when I've worked in immersive sound in a live setting, the goal has been more about connection with what's happening on stage and connecting the sound in the room to what's happening on stage. Because, you know, one of the things we've been doing for years is we've got like a pastor talking on stage, and then we've got these left and right hangs of speakers. And usually, if you're not right in the middle of the room, your brain kind of, you know, you feel like they're talking from that speaker. So there's this disconnect where, you know, I see him on the stage, but the sound is coming from out, you know, way off to my right or way off to my left. And it's one of those things that I doubt the average attender is thinking about that. But it's one of those things that I think is a disconnect. And when you're trying to communicate on a message that, you know, we think is important in the church, having that disconnect there isn't necessarily a good thing. So with immersive sound and live, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the people in the room connected to what's going on stage so that they really can focus on what's going on the stage. When you move into a studio environment and mixing for surround or Dolby Atmos or an immersive format like that, I think you can get a lot more creative in placement of things and moving things around and flying things around. But in the live environment, sometimes you can do that. I mean, Cirque du Soleil has been doing stuff in surround for a long time. But, you know, they've got like sound effects and you can have things kind of whizzing overhead and around the room. In church, right now, not that the day could never happen where that was a mainstay of what we were doing every week. Maybe, I don't know how it would happen. I would be interested in hearing that and seeing that, but right now it's not really a big part of what most churches are doing. So
I hear Adam Taylor somewhere thinking to himself, wait a second, we had some Cirque du Soleil performers in our Christmas service, so now I can start mixing and surround at church.
And I'm thinking Brian Bailey's
Definitely.
like, we've got people flying around. We've got flying drummer boys.
Well, and Preston Wood's putting in a D&B soundscape system right now. It's going to be like, I want to go and hear that thing. That's going to be fun.
Let's go
that'll be cool.
Do a church visit on a Monday.
Monday?
Well, Sunday for that, and then Monday, because they're not going to want to hang out after.
So tell me this, David, have you toyed around at all, or is your brain tickling on the idea of mixing in surround for live stream?
I would love to mix in surround for live stream. I don't know when that's going to really happen. I think right now the main holdback at least for churches is, since most of the live streams, we're all over the internet, it's YouTube or Facebook or, maybe just something on your website. None of those right now seem to be supporting surround, to my knowledge, unfortunately. But I think doing things in surround, it's going to be a great way to help people at home get connected to what's going on in the room, which, that could be a blessing and a curse in a certain way. I mean, I think if you want people to come to the room in the first place, you've got to do something there that they can't experience anywhere else. So sometimes I wonder, how much of that do we really want to export outside of the room every week?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'll be really cool if that shows up. But who knows? I mean, I'm still waiting to see what happens with this metaverse thing that I hear talk of. Is that going to take off, or
no?
And that was my next question, because I've seen like Life Church has meta service, and Calvary Chapel in Fort Lauderdale has one. So I was curious if you've experienced that at all, if you've been in one of those, if surround makes sense for those.
And does Mark Zuckerberg preach all the messages there?
Let's hope not. I haven't experienced it. I was speaking at a conference, I don't know if it was earlier this year, late last year, where someone was talking about VR in church, and they were doing it. If it's a way for us to reach people who aren't being reached, I think it's a great idea. I haven't experienced it yet. I don't know where the technology's at. Right now, I don't know a lot of people with VR headsets. I know they're out there, but I think until something like that gets convenient for people, it's going to be a smaller audience out there. But I don't think that means you shouldn't look at it and approach it. I mean, those people, they need to be reached just as much as anybody else. So.
And are the streaming services, are those available in surround formats like Netflix and the rest?
Well, Netflix is definitely every streaming service that I can think of is doing stuff in surround.
Okay, Blake. So
but that's been going on for years. So yeah, that's not really a new
Blake,
thing.
can we get the Church Gear podcast onto Netflix, and then David will mix it in surround?
Toby, we're live.
I think you definitely should do that. I think that will really up you in the algorithm.
I think being on Netflix could be quite a disaster if we did it the wrong way. Speaking of disasters, David, you were at Northpoint for 9 years.
Maybe Amazon Prime, though.
There we go. Yes, actually, lots of podcasts are going over there. You were at Northpoint for 9 years, so we know something had to go wrong. Tell us another moment where everything fell apart and how you handled it, and was it your last day there?
Northpoint. I'm sure there were other things at Northpoint, but I actually I got a better disaster story that
hit us.
predates Northpoint. When I was in college, there was a local band I used to guitar tech for, and one week, I think I finally talked them into letting me actually run sound for them at a gig. And I walked in, and I think the house guy, he kind of looked at me, maybe rolled his eyes a little bit, like, this kid probably doesn't know what he's doing, but okay, whatever. So we got going, and he helped me get started and set up, because I really did not know a whole lot of what I was doing at the time. Band was about halfway through their first set, and I kind of leaned forward, and all of a sudden the monitor wedges on stage just went crazy with feedback. So I kind of pulled the faders back a little bit to get things under control, tried pushing up the lead vocal again, and there was no way. And it stopped the show. The band, they had to stop in the middle of their song. And the name of the band was Hello Dave. And the reason they had named their band Hello Dave was they had a previous sound guy who, a lot of times they would say, "Hello, Dave," because he was not quite there. So I'm back at the board trying to figure out what is causing all this feedback, and sort of frantically looking around the venue which was very full, trying to find the house sound guy, who I think he must have gone to find a beer or something like that. I'm trying to find him to get his help. And while I'm frantically running around, the lead singer of Hello Dave seized on the opportunity to explain to the entire crowd who was there how the band got the name Hello Dave. So as I'm walking around the venue trying to find the house guy, all of these people in the crowd are saying, "Are you Dave? Are you Dave?" So
That is tough.
it was probably about a good 6 or 7 years before I tried doing live sound again after that
man.
gig.
That gig almost destroyed your whole potential career.
Yeah, that was.
I aspire to that level of pettiness to name my whole band after someone just to mess with them.
Yeah.
Dave,
But to explain what happened, the monitor wedges, the graphic EQs for those were at my knees in the rack, and I had leaned forward, and with my knees, I had basically taken every fader on the graphic EQ for the monitors and pushed it to the roof.
That'll do it.
cut yourself off at the knees right there.
Yes.
So Dave, now that we've gone through a painful moment, you learn a lot of wisdom through those moments. So give us your tech takeaway. That's how we like to wrap all of our episodes. What would you say to a group full of church techs to make their Sundays better?
Boy, I think, the biggest source of tension that I see in a lot of churches, it comes from expectations and people having misaligned expectations. The expectations of the production crew are different from the expectations of the musicians, which sometimes are different from the expectations of the senior pastor. And I think you've got to get all of that stuff clear. I think if you're a staff member or volunteer or anyone with someone above you, your job is to understand exactly what the expectations of are you and for what you're doing. Don't wait to have somebody set them for you. Go and find them and figure them out. And, if you are in a leadership role, your job is to clarify and very specifically communicate those expectations to the people you are leading. And I think a lot of times when you get that stuff straight, it just makes everything run a whole lot smoother. Everybody kind of understands what they're doing, and you get everybody on the same page for a fun Sunday.
Well, that's really good. Toby, do you feel like you've communicated your expectations for me on this podcast?
Apparently not clearly, because they have been wildly unmet.
Wow. All right. Well, hey, Dave, going back to
you. Well, now you got somewhere to start from. So,
man, do you have anything you want to plug? How people can reach out to you to come mix for their church?
Sure. You can, I've got a lot of websites, I guess.
I recommend you just having one.
Yeah, they're all different. If you're looking to, if your church, you're trying to put out some music, www.staglproductions.com is a great place to find me. And really, if you want to do training, need help with anything audio related, that's one place you can connect with me. I have another website, goingto11.com, where I've been publishing articles for a very long time. So there's resources over that. And then people can find me on social media. Instagram seems to be the most popular these days. And I am FOH Dave 1 there. Used to be FOH Dave, but that was a mistake I made. And now I am FOH Dave 1.
Wait, why was that a mistake?
Well, there was a thing years ago where everybody was freaking out about Instagram holding copyrights, and everybody deleted their accounts for, I don't know, it was probably 3 weeks. Maybe it was a little longer than that. And going back, couldn't get your name back. So
fascinating.
That was, yeah.
We appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Toby, what do we do with Church Gear?
Hello, Blake. Don't you even know?
I was teeing you up. We buy church production gear.
We do?
Yep.
Oh.
We don't just podcast all the time.
Oh. I didn't know that.
Well, you and I don't buy it, but other people
Explain to me more.
buy it. So if you have a church full of production gear that you don't use anymore, in a closet perhaps, or maybe in the ceiling tiles of your bathroom, give us a call. And well, actually, don't give us a call. Nobody answers the phone here, but make a list on our website, and we'll make you an offer on the gear, and we'll come buy it.
AJ answers the phone, just so you know.
For sales, not for acquisitions.
That's true. And in the words of our guest, David, go to www.churchgear.com like it's 2001.
Yeah.